This is going to be quite an amazing week as we decide whether we're going to transform into what or restore. But if we want to restore the country, it's going to take an awful lot of work. But here's the hope. We've done it before. And it stands as one of America's greatest economic achievements. And yet there is a good chance you have never, ever heard of it. Reams have been written about the Great Depression and FDR's colossal government expanding New Deal, but you would be hard-pressed to find even a mention in most history books that we have in our classrooms about this amazing turnaround 10 years prior. The year was 1920. The newly elected Warren G. Harding was inheriting a mess from his predecessor, Woodrow Wilson. He didn't give speeches about how he inherited it. The country was in a depression with record unemployment, massive debt, and a bloated and inefficient federal government. It was as bad as anything in 1929 or 1930. They didn't use a stimulus package or tax increases. What was the secret? How did we get out of it? Watch this. The year was 1920, and America was in a crisis. Soldiers had returned home from World War I to find that their jobs were gone. Unemployment doubled to nearly 12%. Stock market was on its way to losing half of its value. The gross national product was in free fall. Outgoing President Woodrow Wilson's decision to involve America in World War I and his dyed-in-the-wool progressive agenda left the country reeling. Wilson had used the war effort to grossly expand an already bloated federal government. And in an effort to redistribute the wealth, he raised the top income tax to 77%. The end result was a country deeply in debt with an economy that was on the verge of total collapse. This was the Depression you probably never heard of, wiped clean from our history books. Why? It's called the Forgotten Depression. More on that in a minute. Another key factor in this economic nightmare was the action taken by the Federal Reserve, another Wilson-era progressive idea. As times got tougher during Wilson's last term, the Fed began to print money and make it easier to get credit. Even as America's 29th president, Warren G. Harding, took an oath of office in 1921, the country was on the brink. He wasted no time. His plan was astonishingly simple. No bailouts, no stimulus package. In fact, just the opposite.
Between 1920 and 22, the federal budget was in fact cut roughly in half. They cut top marginal income tax rates and marginal income tax rates for all groups substantially throughout the 20s. After they cut marginal tax rates so substantially, they were also able to cut the national debt, not the deficit, the national debt, by 1/3 during the 1920s.
The budget was cut in half. Tax rates reduced in all income brackets. The national debt reduced by 1/3. In 18 months, America rebounded. The result? The Roaring Twenties.
It was during the 1920s that millions of Americans bought their first radio, millions of Americans bought their first refrigerator, their first car. The number of Americans who had telephone doubled.
President Harding died of a heart attack 2 years into his presidency, but his successor, Calvin Coolidge, continued what he had started.
I want the people of America to be able to work less for the government and more for themselves. I want them to have the rewards of their own industry. This is the chief meaning of freedom.
Limited government and free enterprise fueled one of the greatest success stories in American history. Again, you probably never heard of this.
We never hear a thing about the Depression of 1920 for obvious reasons, because we might draw the wrong conclusions. We might conclude that maybe these policies could be implemented today. We're not allowed to draw that conclusion, so this episode is simply left off the table.
What the history books can't deny is just 9 years later, in spite of all the country had been through, progressive presidents, Herbert Hoover, FDR, following Woodrow Wilson's progressive playbook of bloated government, massive spending, and sky-high taxes, led us back to the brink, the Great Depression. And by the way, In another undeniable example of progressive revisionist history, you, me, our kids have all been taught that FDR's New Deal proved to be the salvation of America. Nothing could be further from the truth. The New Deal expanded government to levels approaching a dictatorship. Taxes reached obscene levels, and the era of government entitlements, many of which are still choking our economy today, was born. The New Deal prolonged the Great Depression in America. As other countries around the world rebounded years earlier, America suffered through a full decade of hardship. And yet, surprisingly, unexplainably, it's that very solution that serves as the model for our leaders today as America once again suffers through a crisis brought on by progressive leadership. The Forgotten Depression, forgotten no more. To know where you are, you've got to know your history, where we've been. We'll be able to see the future. Get the history you never learned. We have produced a couple of documentaries on this for my website at glennbeck.com. The full story on the Forgotten Depression and much, much more in documentary form, Insider Extreme, available only to glennbeck.com subscribers. Check out our mini documentaries on the progressives, The Forgotten Depression and Doomed to Repeat. It will truly blow your mind. Check it out now.